this is probably the most important thing that I will talk about today. And this is the idea of how do you build an effective CBA program? And I know the feeling of, projects are going through and what do we do? And there's no quick, magic potion or magic bullet. To win a CBA, just like to win power, takes what we call a comprehensive campaign. There's no way around any of these elements. So if you think that you can do it with just organizing and mobilization and no research and no communication, or no coalition building, you're going to lose. By and large, you're not going to win what you could. So the elements of a comprehensive campaign or a comprehensive program. First of all, we have to have systematic research. And I can't emphasize this enough. I was fortunate to go to New Orleans to do a set of trainings on CBAs about a year and a half or 2 years ago. And I brought with me just a list of, and some other folks I came with, a list of 47 projects we had just picked up in the newspaper that we knew were going through the city process. And that was a hot item in the training in New Orleans because nobody had any idea what was happening. And the same thing happens in every city and every region. The only way to know is for us to do it ourselves. There's no one from the city that is going to tell you. There's no one from the redevelopment agency that has a responsibility to tell you or that will ever tell you. You have to set up your own research capacity. And what does a research capacity need to do? First of all, you need to understand the development process. Who are the decision makers? What power do they have? What are the current levers built into the process for a community to get involved? What are the requirements that currently exist for developers? Secondly, we need to know about the project, understand who the developer is way before the decision is going to be made. So that means, what do you have to do? You have to basically set up essentially something like a private detection agency inside your organizations. You have to get, and believe me, we have the smartest people that exists. There's no one in the corporate America that's smarter than our researchers who are well trained. And they can find out this information by building relationships, by going through lots of different places and unearthing what are the major projects. Because they're really out there to discover. It's just no one is going to tell us about it. We have to go find out for ourselves. And then we also need to know the points of weakness of the developer. Like, for example, they have 1 million tax liens, or they didn't pay their children's, private school bill. Those kinds of things. Those tell us things about the developer. Like, can we trust this guy? Or do we need to have something that's so enforceable with multiple levels where we know what we can do if we're nagging on the agreement? Okay, so that's the research component, and there are other aspects to research that can be helpful that we could talk about. Things like what we call framing studies that really lay out how unjust and unfair development is in an area, but also that put up the vision, this notion that, oh my God, look, we can lift hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty if we just use the tools that we already have at our disposal. Okay, neighborhood organizing. Now, notice that I've separated out neighborhood organizing and coalition building because they're two completely separate and different types of organizing, and they both are crucial. So if you're doing a project-based CBA, there is no substitute for knocking on doors. We often start with a survey. What do you want to see? Did you know that there was going to be this big, huge project in your neighborhood? How important to you is jobs? How important to you is housing? How important to you is what is important to you? And then recruiting a set of leaders to be on a leadership committee, to be part of the negotiating team, to be part of the coalition. Coalition building. This is probably one of the hardest things that we'll ever have to do. And one of the lessons that we've learned that Maria can talk a little bit more about, there's no way to build an effective coalition without full-time staff. That might seem like a simple thing, but 1/8 of a person here and 1/8 of a person there from your different organizations does not build an effective coalition. You've got to have full-time staff. You've got to have a true focus on building trust and getting to a place of understanding and solidarity, because you've got to have the labor movement at the table, because we don't want to be divided between jobs and housing and environment. We've got to have environmentalists at the table. We've got to have community leaders at the table. We've got a multiracial approach generally. For example, in Los Angeles, we have to organize multiracially. So we've got a big challenge in front of us, and we can get beyond those challenges. And we have multiple times, almost every case where we thought were insurmountable challenges, full-time staff doing the organizing, taking the time in advance to actually build the trust, build a list of demands, but build a realistic sense of all for one and one for all, and that we're not going to win everything we want. That is crucial to winning. Okay, policy advocacy. This is a nice way of saying politics. Basically, we've got to know who the decision makers are, how much power they have, who's their rabbi or their priest, who from their district influences them, something we call power analysis. And we actually usually have a number scale, 1 to 5. Who's the 1 who's the most supportive, and 5 who's totally against us, and then 2, 3, and 4 in between. We do a detailed and in-depth power analysis as we begin a campaign, and then we track it throughout. And then every single activity throughout the campaign is designed to influence those decision makers. And we have to keep our eye on the prize. And yes, maybe a huge mobilization would feel good, but probably it's not the best use of our resources unless it's going to be in a targeted district or something connected to actually moving the chess pieces toward a win. Legal. So I don't know about you guys, and I'm actually a trained lawyer, but I left that long ago because I knew it was the path to stifling lack of creativity. But lawyers are necessary for two reasons. One, first of all, we need to know what the potential obstacles might be. So there are some things we can't ask for. There's a few things that we can't ask for, or that we need to have in separate agreements. There are some key legal issues that it's important for us to know about. And then we need to have lawyers who know how to do this, draft these agreements, not negotiate these agreements. That is a huge difference. A lot of people think that lawyers have to negotiate because we are not educated enough to be able to do it ourselves. Wrong. It's the opposite. People who are in the front line, who know what they want and what their communities want, are the ones that need to negotiate. But lawyers need to be involved to help write it up in a way that's enforceable. And then if we have to take these issues to court, which generally we have not had to do in the project-specific CBAs, we need to have the lawyers ready to fight for us. Okay, communication, and we can talk a lot about this, but basically we need to have everybody trained as spokespeople. We need to have our frame, which is what is the big values point that we're going to appeal to the decision makers and the public on. And it could be about respect. If we're going to be in a fight to get the developer to the table, what's the best way for us to frame this? And then what's the specific set of messages, and who are the messengers going to be? Now, that's kind of vague sounding stuff, but a win or a loss can oftentimes depend on a good communication strategy and at least a thoughtful plan. And then finally, making sure we think about how we're going to implement this ahead of time, and that we actually build implementation in, and I'm going to talk more about that.